Bryn Caldwell sat in her silver Bentley at the circular drive of Chateau Avelin Resort, watching a string of black tuxedos and pastel gowns glide beneath the stone arch like swans on a lake. Inside, a quartet tuned a wedding march, and somewhere beyond the hedges, her twin sister, radiant, effervescent Lila, was minutes from walking down an aisle braided with magnolia and glass lanterns. The spring air in North Georgia smelled like lemon and honeysuckle. It should have felt like a fairy tale. Instead, Bryn's chest rang hollow as if someone had set a crystal goblet there and tapped it with a fork. At 31, she was the youngest woman to run a Fortune 500 company, the architect behind Caldwell Nexus, a $3.2 billion cloud infrastructure juggernaut born from nothing but stubbornness, caffeine, and her conviction that elegant systems could make messy human lives simpler. Reporters called her the Diamond Mind, investors called her an automatic win, and competitors had learned to stop calling her anything but Madam CEO. Yet none of that armor stopped the ache that pulsed inexplicably at the thought of walking into her twins' wedding alone. Her phone buzzed, a message from her assistant, Carmen Ortiz. Board moved to Tuesday 9:30. You promised yourself you'd enjoy today. Try. Also, you look lethal in navy. Go break hearts, boss. Bryn smiled despite herself. She checked her reflection one last time. The sweep of blonde hair pinned into a graceful knot, the midnight blue satin that skimmed her collarbones with quiet authority. The pearls Grant Caldwell had given her when Caldwell Nexus crossed its first billion. She opened the door. Heels clicked. A valet greeted her by name with a too-wide smile that said he'd already recognized her from half a dozen magazine covers. Eleanor Caldwell materialized at the entrance like a breeze scented with Chanel. 58, silver hair cut into a classic bob, she could silence a room with a glance and fill a fundraiser with one email. Darling, Eleanor said, arms out, eyes sparkling. You look exquisite. Where is your date? There it was, the question Bryn had rehearsed answers for and never learned to bear. I came solo, Mom. The Centeris merger has... Absurd. Eleanor's smile thinned, then softened. You cannot marry your calendar, Bryn. Grant Caldwell strode up in charcoal and confidence, the same presence that once bulldozed a dying strip mall into the glittering Caldwell Market District. There's my rainmaker, he said, folding Bryn into a hug that still smelled faintly of cedar and sawdust. How's the merger looking? Beautifully, Bryn said, if Tokyo stops over-engineering the diligence. We were discussing your personal life, Eleanor told him, as if announcing an item on a board agenda. Grant arched a brow. There's time after cake. They swept her toward the garden. Lanterns glowed. White roses climbed iron trellises. The oaks held strings of lights like stars captured for hire. Couples drifted by holding hands. Every tableau looked designed to remind her of what she did not have. Bryn. The syllable cut through the music like a blade across silk. Damon Whitaker stepped out from the columned shadows in a suit expensive enough to forgive the sin of his smugness. He was tall, handsome in the catalog sense, teeth like a commercial break, and the easy entitlement of a man who had never waited his turn in line. I didn't see your name on the guest list, Bryn said, ice clinging to courtesy. Nate and I reconnected over a deal, Damon said unbothered. I'm family adjacent. His gaze roamed her dress with proprietary nostalgia. You look devastating. Thank you. Please enjoy the ceremony. Bryn. He stepped closer. About us. There is no us. We were combustible, he said softly. We made each other better. You tried to make me smaller. Come on, he scoffed as if she were adorable. You're remembering the worst day. Weddings are signs. Maybe this is the universe tapping our shoulders. The universe can send an email. Bryn angled away. The last thing she needed was Damon weaving himself into the day like errant thread. Is there a problem here? A warm voice asked, deep enough to steady the ground. Bryn turned. The man approaching wore a fitted black suit with no pretense, a slim camera strap crossing his chest, and the kind of posture that came from lugging gear and learning how to move through crowds without being noticed. He had close-cut curls, warm brown skin, and eyes that held a quiet intelligence, a softness at the edges that suggested he listened more than he spoke. No problem, Damon said, flashing a smile that failed to reach his eyes. Just catching up with an old flame. The newcomer looked at Bryn, not Damon, and what she saw there, curiosity, a question, a calculus of protection and respect, felt like a lifeline tossed across churning water. He stepped to her side as if they'd rehearsed the choreography. "There you are," he said with an ease that felt almost familiar. "They're lining up the attendants. Ready, sweetheart?" He offered his arm. The script wrote itself in Bryn's head. Accept the rescue, rewrite the scene, walk away intact. She slid her hand into the crook of his arm. "I'm ready," Damon's smile stuttered. "I'm sorry," he said to the stranger, as if the apology were an accusation. "You are." "Malik Carter," he replied, extending his free hand with calm gravity. "And you?" "Damon Whitaker. Bryn and I have history." "History," Bryn said, the word cooling on her tongue, being the operative term. "Malik and I need to find our seats." Malik's arm tightened minutely. "And I've got you," that felt like a promise. And together they turned. Bryn could feel Damon's stare prick her shoulder blades all the way to the aisle. But for the first time since parking, her pulse eased. "Thank you," she murmured when they were clear. "I don't know who you are, and I don't care if you're an angel or a hallucination. Thank you." "Most people don't need angels," he said, smile flickering. "Just good timing and a little cover." Her eyes darted to the camera at his hip. "You are actually invited, right?" she whispered. "Or are we both about to get escorted out by a man named Clyde with forearms like bridge cables?" A low laugh rolled from him, unguarded, rich. The sound put color back in the afternoon. "I'm working. Carter and Reed. Jonah's shooting the ceremony. I'm on crowd candidates and family. Your sister's list was specific." "So you're the photographer." "One of them," he said. "And apparently now you're decoy." They reached the rows of white chairs, the carved wooden sign that read, "Choose a seat, not a side." Family is family. Reality reasserted itself. She belonged in the front with Eleanor and Grant. He belonged wherever the light was best. The pretense would fracture at the seams the minute they separated. "Mr. Photographer," Bryn said, feeling both ridiculous and oddly sure, "would you consider extending the charade just through the reception? My mother has turned my love life into a philanthropy project. My aunt treats me like a reality show, and Damon improvises himself into any room that says Bryce Whitaker on the donor wall." "Damon Whitaker," he corrected gently, and Bryn realized she'd unconsciously fused Damon to his father, the developer whose money made the Whitaker name a permanent plaque in 3 states. "Right," she said. "Him. I know this is insane. I'm asking a stranger to lie." "It isn't a lie to make someone feel safe," Malik said, studying her face. "Yes, I'll help. But 3 conditions." The corner of her mouth lifted. "You're negotiating with the queen of terms and conditions? First, your real name. Bryn. Bryn Caldwell." Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, then the quick decision not to make a fuss about it. "Second," he continued, "I still do my job. I will disappear when light shifts, and I will reappear with the speed of a man who just watched a mother cry during the father-daughter dance." "Understood." "Third," he said, "dinner. After. Somewhere terrible and delicious. And you tell me the truth about why you needed a rescue." She should have said no. She heard herself say, "Deal." Music tumbled across the garden, the first elegant phrases of Vivaldi rearranged for a string quartet with an Instagram following. "Go," Malik said softly. "Be the sister of the bride. I'll be around. When you need me, look for the guy pretending not to stare at you." "Is that your official artistic method?" "It's my unofficial survival strategy." Eleanor waved from the front row, already mouthing, "Where is he?" as if Malik's existence should be documented, notarized, placed in a scrapbook. Bryn squeezed his arm, then slipped to her family. She glanced back exactly once. Malik had already moved, shoulders squared, lens lifted, folding the ceremony into frames. The wedding unfurled like a well-funded dream. Lila, in satin that looked poured rather than sewn, floated to Nathan Cross, a gentle, sharp-witted attorney whose eyes held unqualified adoration. Vows knotted themselves into a single rope. Applause spilled through oak branches. Champagne sighed. Bryn clapped until her palms tingled. She was incandescently happy for Lila. She was also abruptly a small boat on a bright lake without any oars. "Wasn't that glorious?" Eleanor whispered, dabbing at tears. "If your sister can find a soulmate, so can you, darling." "Mom." "Bryn," Damon cut in smoothly from the aisle. Tone dipped in old privilege. "Mrs. Caldwell, congratulations. Beautiful ceremony." Eleanor's smile cooled by 10 degrees. Damon had always been polite to her, which is to say he had been charming when it served him. "Thank you, Damon," she said. "We're sitting for the reception. If you'll excuse, I was hoping to speak with Bryn," he said, eyes flicking to the front row as if marking his audience. "I'm here with someone," Bryn said, standing. "We should find him before the reception." "The photographer," Damon said, laugh dry. "Bryn, be serious." "I make a habit of it," said a new voice, Malik's, arriving like he had heard the exact sentence his entrance required. He extended a hand to Eleanor with gentlemanly grace. "Mrs. Caldwell, Malik Carter, it's a privilege." Eleanor's curiosity sharpened into interest. Her gaze took Malik's measure. Posture, shoes, watch, the way he centered on Bryn as if she were the north on a compass. "You photograph for Carter and Reed?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "Jonah and I founded it 5 years ago. We handle corporate campaigns and editorial, and I sometimes wander off to chase stories that keep me honest." "And how do you know our Bryn?" Eleanor asked, eyes bright. Malik's answer left room to breathe and nowhere for Damon to twist it. "Through mutual friends in tech, her reputation travels faster than the news cycle, but it was her kindness to a frazzled event coordinator that convinced me she's the real thing." Damon's jaw ticked. "And what do you do in tech, exactly?" he asked, loading the word with scorn for people who circled power without owning it. "Provide images that help companies tell the truth about themselves," Malik said. "The right photograph can make a mission legible." "How convenient," Damon said mildly. "Bryn always did attract aspirational types." Bryn felt the insult land against old scar tissue. Malik's smile didn't move. His eyes did. "I understand being protective of someone you once cared for," he said. "Bryn deserves that. She does not deserve to be diminished." Grant appeared like a well-timed deus ex machina. "Everything all right here?" "Perfect," Bryn said, relief threading her voice. "Dad, this is Malik Carter. He works with Carter and Reed." Grant shook Malik's hand and squinted, sorting memory. "Did you shoot the Caldwell Market District reopening?" "We did," Malik said. "My partner focused on the ribbon cutting. I followed the maintenance crew that rebuilt the clock tower." "Your superintendent told the best stories." Grant grinned. "He would. You notice workers. Not everyone does. It's where the soul of a place lives." Eleanor, satisfied for now, looped her arm through Grant's. "We're off to greet the crosses. Bryn, Malik, don't let the Whitakers corner you." "We'll try," Bryn said, and watched her parents move away like a tide that, for once, didn't pull her in its wake. "You have a talent for answering questions without lying," she told Malik softly. "Occupational hazard," he said. "People can see the truth when they breathe near it." "So what do you see when you breathe near me?" He studied her just long enough for her to feel it. "A woman who can level a room with a single sentence and is still somehow afraid of being a disappointment at her own sister's wedding." Her laugh was more exhale than sound. "I hate that you're right. We all hate mirrors the first second." They migrated toward the reception hall, where crystal chandeliers held evening in their fasces and place cards tried to predict human chemistry. Bryn's card sat at the Caldwell family table. A second card, handwritten, read Mr. Carter, and Miracle of Miracles had been slid beside hers. Carmen must have worked a last-minute seating chart miracle. Bryn mentally sent her flowers. Dinner showcased a theater of polite interrogation. Vivian Cross, Nathan's mother, with a disarming candor that could sell a church on Tuesday, leaned forward during the salad. "Mr. Carter, what do you actually love to shoot? Weddings pay the bills, but your eyes lit up when you said stories." "Community rebuilds," Malik said without flinching. "Makers. People who stitch dignity back into neighborhoods everyone else forgot." Last year, we followed a program training formerly incarcerated folks to become urban farmers. They took abandoned lots and turned them into breakfast. Breakfast, Grant repeated as if taste testing the word. That's a mission. Eleanor smiled at Bryn as if to say, see, a man who hears the subtext. A family friend across the table, Melody with her flawless bob and more opinions than hobbies, beamed at Malik. How refreshing, she said. Bryn always dated men who were threatened by her success. You seem different. Bryn nearly choked on a sip of Chablis. Malik, unruffled, said, it's hard to be threatened by what you admire. By the main course, Damon had vanished, either exiled by security or bored by a conversation he could not dominate. Bryn let her shoulders drop half an inch. She realized suddenly that she had been waiting for Malik to vanish too, like so many men did when a piece of her life didn't flatter them. Instead, he kept reappearing with a camera and a steadiness that said, I'm here, but I won't compete with your oxygen. The band shifted to a slow waltz. Lila tugged Nathan onto the dance floor, cheeks glowing, veil laughing in the lights. All couples, the bandleader sang into his vintage mic. Panic grazed Bryn's ribs. Couples meant closeness. Closeness meant acting. Acting meant risking that something real might slip through. I'm terrible at this, she warned. I am not, Malik said, standing, hand extended. Trust me. She placed her palm in his. His hand was warm. On the dance floor, he slid one hand respectfully to the small of her back and threaded their fingers with the other. The first measures folded around them. His lead was gentle, confident. He moved like he had counted light his whole life. You're good, she admitted. You're following, he countered, smile easing her spine. Following is hard for generals. Is that what I am? You command rooms, redirect storms, and have an assistant who can rearrange seating charts by telepathy. You tell me. They swayed along the edge of the floor where the chandeliers threw broken constellations over the polished wood. The scent of lemon cake and garden roses rose and blurred. Her heartbeat softened into the rhythm of his steps. Bryn, Malik said quietly, tuning out the world. Are you okay? With him earlier? He was, persuasive once, she said, and precise about which fault lines to press. Manipulation wears good shoes, he murmured. He made my ambition feel like a character flaw, she said. The confession felt like opening a window in winter. I let him. The right person, Malik said, eyes warm and clear, would bring you water during the board meeting and brag about your brilliance to strangers. She stared up at him. It was absurd to be dizzy from a sentence. It was also true. Why are you doing this? She asked, voice almost lost under the violins. Helping me? He breathed out a small laugh. Maybe I'm not pretending about everything. What does that mean? It means I noticed you months ago, he said, words steady as a metronome. We shot the Market District reopening. You stood under the refurbished clock with a hard hat and a black dress and told a city it could be both beautiful and functional. I almost introduced myself. Then I remembered I was a photographer with sawdust on my shoes. And now you have camera dust on your shoes, she said softly, and I'm brave enough to risk a dance. The song tilted into its final bars. Before she could answer, Carmen appeared at the edge of the floor, urgent but apologetic. I'm so sorry, Bryn. Tokyo on the Centeras timeline. Mr. Yamamoto is on video and uses the word deal breaker. Bridal suite. 2 minutes. The glass castle of the evening wavered. Go, Malik said, letting her hands go with reluctance, but without a single flinch of complaint. I'll be here when you get back. You will? I said I'm good at timing. 45 minutes later, after leveraging Grace into deadlines and explaining American fiscal quarter eccentricities in a navy gown, Bryn hurried back into the ballroom, adrenaline ebbing into exhaustion. She scanned the room the way her brain scanned code for errors. Swift, precise, hopeful. Found him. At the bar with a tall, lean man, Bryn guessed was Jonah Reed. Malik glanced up as if he had felt her before he saw her. Relief moved across his face like sunrise. There she is, Jonah said, grinning. Our mystery muse. Crisis conquered? Temporarily domesticated, Bryn said. You must be Jonah. Co-conspirator, tax write-off, and the one who carries the light stands, he said. and a fan of your company's coffee machines. Congratulations on the merger rumors I'm not supposed to know. I realize this is wildly unprofessional, Bryn said, turning to Malik. But could we talk somewhere quiet? Jonah lifted his glass. I'll go document an uncle doing the worm. They found a shadowed alcove between two towering palms, where candlelight made soft constellations on the wall. Music eddied around them, voices dimmed into hum. I don't want to waste words, Bryn said, fingers twisting a cocktail napkin into geometry. Earlier you said maybe you're not pretending about everything. I need to know what is real to you, because this started as cover, and I'm good at building walls that look like windows. Malik didn't rush. He tucked his hands in his pockets, looked at her fully. What's real is that I was drawn to you before today and would have helped you whether you were a CEO or the florist's cousin. What's real is that dancing with you felt like the first time in weeks my body and my head kept the same time. What's real is that I'm interested. No cameras, no pretense. What if I'm not good at this? She asked, the words frightening and freeing. What if I only know how to negotiate terms and hit numbers? Then we learn a new language, he said. Slowly, no quarterly targets, no pitch deck, just street light, pie at midnight, both of us telling the truth, even when it trembles. Her laugh shook a little. Pie at midnight is a bold promise? I make a mean peach, he said. Welcome to Georgia. She drew a breath that felt like the first honest one all day. Okay, she said. One condition. He lifted a brow, a mirror of her earlier grin. I thought you were done negotiating. I'm never done, she said. We start with dinner. Not because I need a fake boyfriend, because I want to sit across from you with no script and figure out if the world feels larger there. His smile was small and astonished, as if she'd handed him a key he hadn't dared ask for. Tomorrow night, he said, after I send the gallery to your sister and drink water like it's a sport. Tomorrow, she echoed. A shadow slid across the palm leaves, and the temperature of the air changed. Damon. He'd found them as if negativity were a bloodhound. This is ridiculous, he said softly, voice polished, eyes hard. Bryn, you don't know this man's last name, and you're letting him orbit your family. Bryn straightened. His last name is Carter, and I invited him to my orbit. Damon's attention hopped to Malik like a mosquito. What's your angle? Access? Money? A bump for your brand? My angle, Malik said, tone almost gentle, is that she deserves to breathe. This is a facade, Damon said to Bryn, cutting with precision. You're using him to hide from real intimacy. From me. From anyone who might know you? The quiet in Bryn cracked, then knit. She felt Malik take a breath beside her, but not step in. He was giving her the first move. Respect tasted like courage. You're right about one thing, she said to Damon. This started as pretense. Because I didn't want to be cornered by you again. Because I didn't owe you a conversation, and you made me feel like I did. But let me be crystalline. There is nothing left between us. Leave me alone. Damon blinked 3 slow times, like a man recalibrating the coordinates and discovering the map had changed. This isn't over, he said, but the sentence had no place to land. It is, Bryn said. It has been. He went. The air remembered how to taste like magnolia. Bryn turned to Malik, expecting judgment, pity, something fragile. He offered neither, only steadiness. I should have told you sooner, she said, words tumbling, that the act was an act, that I asked you into it because I couldn't bear this, that even now I'm bad at naming what I want. You just did, he said, voice as soft as the candle flicker. You wanted a shield, then you wanted a chance. Both are honest. You're not angry. I'm not a man who confuses discomfort with deception, he said, but I need to ask you something. Ask. Are you afraid of something real? He said. Not with me, with anyone. Her throat went tight. She could have lied. She was practiced at it, the elegant kind that wore good shoes to family dinners. Yes, she said. Okay, he said, as if she'd told him her coffee order. Let's be afraid and try anyway. She exhaled, and the exhale felt like the first line of a life she might have wanted if she had been brave enough to admit it. Tomorrow, he repeated, eyes warm and exact. "Tomorrow," she said, and for the first time all day, the word felt like a promise she could keep. The next evening, Atlanta softened into gold, and Piedmont Park sounded like 100 tiny festivals stitched together. Bryn arrived on time, which for her meant early. She stood beneath a live oak, watching the wind crease the lake and trying not to imagine herself saying the wrong thing so perfectly that a stranger would nod politely and retreat forever. "Bryn," Malik called, raising a hand. Jeans, navy button-down, sleeves folded to the forearms, a camera bag slung cross-body because he was the kind of person who never walked without a way to keep a moment. He hugged her lightly, the contact brief and sure. "You found it. I bribed my GPS with promises of tacos," she said. Her voice sounded almost normal. "Korean bulgogi first," he decreed, shepherding her through a crowd scented with smoke and sweetness. "Then the empanadas. Then we pretend we're too full for churros and eat them anyway." It was supposed to be awkward. It wasn't. He asked lazy, generous questions and then listened like her answers were worth saving. She learned he had started as a mechanical engineering major at Georgia Tech before an elective darkroom class knocked the wind out of his future and rearranged it. That he still loved bridges because they were solved poems. That he and Jonah had built Carter and Reed on borrowed gear and nerve, saying yes to jobs that should have terrified them. He learned she still slept with her phone on the pillow because Tokyo liked to call it hours that made sense to Tokyo. That she kept a guitar in her closet and had touched it exactly 3 times. That the first time Caldwell Nexus paid for health insurance for all employees, she cried in an empty conference room, forehead on the cool laminate, because it meant the company had become the kind of place she meant it to be. They took paper boats heavy with bulgogi to a patch of grass and ate cross-legged. Music drifted from a stage no one had planned. Teenagers clattered past on borrowed scooters. A dog in a bandana considered their food with theological attention. "You said last night there were stories you chase that keep you honest," Bryn said. "Tell me one." He told her about the farmers who had been inmates and now tended Swiss chard on land that used to be a littered lot. He told her about a woman named June who built raised beds with hands that had memorized how to survive and taught neighborhood kids how to coax tomatoes from stubborn soil. He spoke without romance and with a tenderness that made Bryn's throat tighten. "We have a community investment fund at Caldwell Nexus," she said slowly. "It's small, but it's designed to amplify projects that multiply dignity. If June's group needs cold storage, grant writing, a website, anything." "You're already building a bridge," Malik said, amused and admiring. "You don't know how not to." "I don't," she admitted. "Is that a problem?" "It's a definition," he said. "I like people who are definitions." They wandered until the sky learned pink. He pointed out light as if it were a living thing. The way it skims water, the way it lifts the edges of a stranger's smile, the way it can turn a parking lot into a cathedral. He passed her his spare body with a 50mm lens and said, "Frame what you feel before you frame what you see." She laughed, tried. Her first pictures were crooked, then less crooked. Then a woman's hand, mid-gesture, explaining love to a friend. Then a boy on tiptoes watching a bubble he had created float just out of reach. "You have an eye," he said matter-of-factly, and she felt a door open in her chest she hadn't realized was locked. They ended at the hill above the park, city glass catching the last light like it had been designed to do only that. She lay back on the grass. He lay beside her, careful, generous with space. The quiet between them grew sturdy. "I was terrified this would be boring," she confessed to the sky. "That without an ex-boyfriend and a wedding orchestra, we'd discover we have nothing to say. And now you've betrayed yourself with a dozen interesting admissions," he said. "I should warn you. If we keep this up, you'll have a favorite food truck, a favorite corner to shoot light through, and an unshakable opinion about whether a prime lens is better than a zoom." "What is the right opinion?" "Prime," he said. "Obviously." She laughed, the sound warm and surprised. Then she turned, and he was already watching her with a steadiness that made words unnecessary. He didn't reach for her. He waited. She closed the distance a fraction. The kiss was unhurried and bright with the simple marvel of yes. It landed somewhere behind her ribs and felt like balance rediscovered. Later, as they walked to their cars, he asked, "Tuesday, I'll cook. Nothing fancy. Peach cobbler, if you promise to grade me like a merciless board. One, I am very hard on dessert, she said. I am very good at peaches. Tuesday came with rain and candles, and a small apartment that felt like intention rather than poverty. He had framed prints on the wall, not of celebrities but of a mechanic's hands, of a street after the storm, of Eleanor Roosevelt in a library captured through a museum glass case with the reflection of a little girl holding a book layered over her shoulder. He fed her cobbler so good she considered negotiating with God. They talked until the rain quit. Somewhere around midnight, she told him how afraid she was, that she was too much and not enough in all the wrong places. He said, I want everything you are, not the idea of you someone else invented. She believed him because he said it like he had looked at 1,000 negatives and learned which were true. 3 weeks settled into a rhythm, dinners, gallery light, a hike where she discovered she did not hate walking uphill if his hand was near, kisses that were patient and then not patient at all. Happiness made new rooms in her days. She did not expect what came with it. The first indication landed on Carmen's tablet, a headline that married her name to a man who had not asked to be famous. Photos from the food truck festival, from the hill, from a sidewalk where they had stopped to share a paper cone of fries. A tone that painted Malik as a project, as a rebound, as a scheme. Carmen closed the office door. We can do nothing and hope it burns out. We can wrong-foot the fire with our own story. Or we can go to war. Bryn called Malik. I'm sorry, she said first, because she did not know another way to open. It's not your fault, he said, but it is our life. Then after a heartbeat, do we want to own it? That night on her balcony, he told her that Jonah had already fielded 5 calls asking whether Malik Carter always positioned his relationships near donors. He laughed at the stupidity of the question and then stopped laughing because it wasn't funny. I'm not backing away, he said quietly, but I want us to be active, not hunted. You're saying we choose the room and the chair and the angle, she said, falling into his metaphors the way she fell into his breath. We tell the truth we want the world to hear, he said, and we draw the line where we need it. They interviewed with a magazine that knew how to hold a story without ringing it. They told the truth, minus the wardrobe of a wedding day pretense. They held hands on a couch with the recorder on the table because they had decided to be brave where it mattered. The piece ran with a photo Malik took of their reflected silhouettes in the museum glass that held Eleanor Roosevelt. The caption read, 2 people in a room where words changed history. The article used minor miracles like nuance and context. The internet did what it does, but a surprising number of voices said the obvious thing aloud. Leave them alone. On a Sunday morning drenched with good light, she read the piece beside him in bed. He set the phone on the nightstand like a fragile relic and looked at her with eyes that dared to be unguarded. I love you, she heard herself say, and only noticed she had not planned to say it when her pulse landed somewhere near her mouth. He did not waste a second. I love you, he said, like a man handing over a key he had carried in his pocket until it left a mark. She cried because sometimes the body resigns from composure without notice. He held her, simple and entire. Outside, Atlanta inhaled and exhaled like a city that had learned weather and resilience. Real life resumed with a rhythm that included media and meals and meetings. It also included Thanksgiving invitations from 2 families who loved strong opinions and different recipes for sweet potatoes. Bryn said yes to both. Fear came as a familiar guest. She opened the door anyway. Bryn warned Malik about Eleanor on the drive to Buckhead. She is immaculately kind and also collects competence like art. My father is more relaxed, she added. He pretends to be unimpressed, and then Googles you at 3 in the morning to catch up. And your grandmother? Malik asked, straightening the navy tie she had tied because she enjoyed the sub-task of care. Loves Sinatra, hates hyphenated last names, will ask your intentions by dessert. Good to know, he said, squeezing her hand at the base of her thumb where her nerves registered in microcodes. For the record, my intentions are to make you ridiculously happy and learn how to set the table at whatever holidays we do. Too polished, she said. You'll want to say it with a joke and a story. He grinned. I have both. Eleanor opened the door herself and kissed Malik's cheek like she had watched him from the kitchen window and approved. The Caldwell house bloomed with warmth and plates and relatives. Malik shook hands with a cohort of uncles, who introduced themselves with occupations and amusements, navigated Aunt Patricia's pointed curiosity with gentle humor, and told Grandmother Helen that his mother taught high school literature and had given him his first camera because she was tired of him taking apart radios and wanted to see what he would do with light instead of wires. "Your intentions?" Helen asked later, lifting one perfect eyebrow, espresso cup poised like a punctuation mark. "To make sure Bryn never becomes smaller because of me," he said. "No joke, one story. And to carry as much of the weight as she will let me." Helen made the smallest sound of satisfaction. Eleanor squeezed Bryn's knee under the table. Grant asked questions about shutter speed and then confessed he'd always secretly wanted to shoot buildings at night. After dinner, Bryn and Malik stood on the back patio, watching the trees frame the last of the day. She felt something unfamiliar and ordinary and enormous, a sense of being placed exactly where she belonged. "They like you," she said. "They like that you are happy," he answered. "So do I." The following weekend, they drove to Savannah in a car with coffee and a playlist that grew honest at the edges. The Hayes house was a Victorian, painted the kind of pale that looked like sugar dissolved into tea. Malik's mother, Michelle, hugged Bryn like she had waited all week to fill that space. His father, David, shook her hand and said, "We've heard about your mind. We're glad you brought your heart." Dinner was casual and collective. Vegetables chopped while stories were told, a roast that perfumed the whole house, pie that could negotiate a truce. After, David took Bryn to the back porch and admitted he had reservations about anyone who thought my son is a ladder. "But you look at him," he said, "like he is a roof." She understood and felt the blessing land with weight. Later, they walked beneath Spanish moss that draped the streets like soft history. Malik stopped under a lamppost that flickered and said, "I can see the rest of my life from here." He did not kneel. He did not rush. He said someday, with a certainty that felt like right now's best friend. They returned to Atlanta with families knit into a pattern that would hold. Work resumed its theater. Caldwell Nexus closed Centaurus with grit and grace. The newspaper of record used the word visionary, and Bryn pretended she did not read it 3 times alone in her kitchen. And then the other shoe, because life is a juggler who loves variety. Damon reappeared not with flowers but with a lawyer. A letter arrived addressed to Bryn and to Caldwell Nexus counsel alleging defamation, tortious interference, and the usual bouquet of saber rattles used by men who prefer courts to apologies. He claimed she had smeared him at a public event and cost him opportunities. He claimed the magazine piece had harmed his reputation. He claimed damages that looked like numbers invented on a napkin. James Morrison, Caldwell Nexus's general counsel, read the letter and said, "It's wind in theater, but it still gets a stage." He recommended a restrained response, a record of Damon's previous communications, a note to event security who remembered escorting a man who wouldn't leave. Bryn didn't want the fight. She also didn't want to let a man rewrite a truth he disliked. The lawsuit made the gossip cycle spin again. Cameras camped, microphones pointed. One of them caught Bryn entering a community center where Caldwell Nexus had funded a coding boot camp for teens. "Ms. Caldwell," a voice called, "is Malik Carter strategic?" She stopped because sometimes stopping is strategy. "Everything that matters in my life is strategic," she said calmly. "My company, my values, the person I love." She didn't look at the camera when she said it. She looked at a girl with braids who wanted to ask about a raise. Inside, Malik waited by the whiteboard because he had guessed what she would do when he texted, "I'm outside, come around back." He took her hand, kissed her cheek, said nothing. Later that night in her apartment, he asked, "Are you sure about living with this volume?" "I am sure of you," she said. Sometimes the answer to the wrong question is the right sentence. Still, attention corrodes. After the third day of being followed to coffee, Bryn lost her temper at a photographer who refused to lower his camera, even when a child tripped behind him. Malik put his body between theirs and said, "She asked." He knew what it was to be a photographer and still believed in consent. The man lowered his camera. The kid laughed. The day went on. They chose to make fewer choices in public. They learned roots. They learned silence. They learned that privacy is not absence. It is a room you decide who enters. On a clear Saturday, Atlanta Monthly asked for a follow-up. Not gossip, but the part of the story that looked like work. Bryn said yes because she wanted to talk about what love did to ambition when the ambition didn't have to choose between being human and being impressive. Malik shot the images himself with a timer because they couldn't find a stranger they trusted with an afternoon. The cover line read, "A different kind of scale." When the piece landed, they lay in her bed again, the city generous with light. "Do you ever feel like we're narrating our life for people who don't deserve it?" she asked. "Sometimes," he said. "Then I remember the people who do. June, the kids at the boot camp, your grandmother, my dad when he thinks no one's looking. We're telling it for them." She thought of bridges again and how they stop being miracles after 2 days because they work. Love felt like that now. Extraordinary until it became the way the world should have worked all along. 6 months later, Bryn signed the documents that made Caldwell Nexus the largest cloud infrastructure provider on a continent that preferred its data centers cold. Reporters would write that she smiled like a woman who had just solved a puzzle while running a marathon. The photo she kept was the one a junior paralegal took while everyone laughed because someone had accidentally printed the signature page twice and she had signed the wrong one first. James clapped her shoulder. "You did it." She texted Malik. "Done." He replied in seconds. "Confirmed. You just changed the weather. Celebration tonight. Wear the dress that looks like midnight." He took her to the one place that had shifted the axis of her life, Chateau Aveline. The garden looked like a memory upgraded. Lanterns threaded the trees. The stones she had heard her shoes strike on the worst day of her loneliness gleamed. For one heartbeat, her stomach clenched. Wedding, Damon, performance. But then she saw it. Her parents, Malik's parents, Lila and Nathan, Jonah and Carmen, people who had become necessary. "What is this?" she asked, already knowing and refusing to know. "I needed witnesses," he said, taking both her hands. "Because some moments deserve echoes." He told the story as if he were photographing it with words. How she had stepped from a silver car looking like competence, had decided to try softness for fun. How she had lifted her chin when a man tried to tilt it down. How she had said yes to a stranger and then yes to herself. He said the word love once and it did not wobble. He knelt, which she had always thought was a cliche until it was him, with a small velvet box, and the kind of expression a person has when all his courage shows up at the same time. He asked. She said yes before his question finished breathing. The garden applauded like it had waited all year to make that sound. Eleanor cried and then immediately offered venues because a general does not rest even when peace is declared. Grant hugged Malik and said, "Welcome to the permanent project list." Michelle whispered in Bryn's ear that she had a recipe for sweet potatoes that would decimate all prior allegiances. David shook Malik's hand and then put his other hand over both of theirs like a benediction. The celebration unspooled like somebody had hired Joy to do logistics. There was cake and dancing and the late arrival of a thunderstorm that tested the lanterns and found them loyal. At one point, Malik turned Bryn slowly beneath the light, and she felt a wave of memory so strong she had to name it. "Last time I danced here," she said, "I was pretending." "I know," he said. "It led us here." "Promise me something," she said, "that we keep telling each other the truth before the world gets a chance to invent it." "I promise," he said. "One more thing. Terms and conditions? Only that we don't try to be extraordinary every day. Bridges hold because they're ordinary most of the time." She laughed, the sound catching like a star in the lantern wires. The weeks after the engagement were a map they learned together. Saving articles for the scrapbook her mother would make. Declining interviews not because they were afraid, but because not every sentence belongs to strangers. Beginning the slow process of convincing two families that a hybrid wedding could be both cathedral and backyard. They argued once about guest lists, once about whether a band could play Sinatra and Solange with equal competence, once about whether to register for plates or invest in a community garden in both their families' names. They solved each with patience that wasn't saintly so much as grounded in the knowledge that neither wanted to win at the other's expense. Work did not stop requiring them to be adults. Bryn flew to Tokyo to soothe a spooked partner. Malik flew to Detroit to shoot a series on black-owned auto shops keeping neighborhoods alive. They sent each other photographs from hotel windows and words so ordinary they felt like vows. Landed, tired, thinking of your laugh, miss the way your kitchen smells like coffee and sunscreen. On a quiet Thursday, she came home to find his book on her kitchen table, Cultivating Hope, a collaboration with Jonah about urban farms and the hands that fed a city. Inside, a dedication that turned her knees unreliable. For Bryn, who reminded me that partnership is a practice. She traced the letters with her fingertip and then called him to say the only thing that felt big enough. Thank you for letting me stand next to the thing you made. They scheduled the wedding for spring under the oaks because both families loved the idea that a place could be redeemed by a new story told truer. She walked the garden with Lila and Carmen to choose where the aisle should bend. Malik walked it with Jonah to study how late light would fall so he could give the photographer the secret of where to stand. Eleanor pretended the guest list could be a manageable number and then admitted defeat with a flourish that looked like confetti. Michelle offered to bake the groom's cake and then doubled the recipe when she realized how many cousins existed. Damon tried once more to ruin the air. A settlement conference was scheduled. James emerged with paperwork and a grin. He blinked, he said. We held. Bryn didn't feel triumphant. She felt complete. Some battles do not reward joy. They reward the absence of recurrence. The night before the wedding, they held a small dinner for the people who had caught them when they stumbled. Grandmother Helen toasted with espresso, not champagne. To bridges, she said succinctly. To roofs. To roofs over bridges when rain insists. Everyone laughed, and the laugh was the sound of a family discovering its shape. In her room later, Bryn stood in front of a mirror that reflected less address than a posture. She pressed her palm to her sternum and felt her pulse behave as if it had studied for this. Carmen knocked, then entered without waiting, because that was their language. You're ready, she said. I am, Bryn answered, astonished to discover it was true. The ceremony did not blur. She noticed everything. The way Malik's tie sat slightly imperfect because she had tied it with trembling hands, and he refused to let Jonah fix it because he wanted to wear her mistake on purpose. The way Eleanor squeezed her fingers at the aisle like a runner passing a baton, not because she wanted to stop, but because the next leg belonged to someone with fresh lungs. The way Malik's mother cried in small, precise tears, as if measuring them to last the whole hour. When Bryn reached Malik, he took her hands, and the officiant, a friend whose voice sounded like reason wrapped in kindness, invited them to speak the vows they had written. Bryn, Malik said, I promise to keep our life both shelter and window. I promise to guard your time like it's a living thing, to make room for your quiet and your thunder, to tell the truth before anyone else gets a chance to narrate us. I promise to bring you water at board meetings, pies in June, and photographs of places you teach me to love. Malik, she said, voice more certain than any boardroom victory, I promise to count your courage among my assets and your gentleness among my mentors. I promise to be ambitious with you, not at you, to build the kind of home where no one has to make themselves smaller to fit. I promise to show up for ordinary Tuesdays, to loan you my belief when yours is low, and to celebrate the work that isn't paid in applause. They exchanged rings that fit like decisions that had waited patiently to be made. They kissed in a garden lanterned not by pretense, but by people who had chosen to stand still and watch two lives turn toward each other without spectacle. After, under trees that had heard the worst version of this day and now heard the best, Bryn and Malik danced again. The band played a waltz, and then, because someone had bribed the bandleader, Solange, he spun her, then drew her close, and she rested her forehead against his cheekbone in a gesture so simple she understood suddenly why the smallest things keep the universe working. Remember when you rescued me, she whispered, without knowing you were rescuing me from more than a man? I remember thinking I was helping a stranger, he said, and then realizing I was meeting my future. She laughed against him. It felt like gratitude. It felt like prayer without the words. Later, much later, when the night had tired of being brilliant and guests had stolen flowers for their kitchens and children had fallen asleep under tables, they walked the garden alone. Bryn traced a finger over the carved "choose a seat," not a side sign still leaning against its easel, and smiled at how literal the metaphor had turned out to be. She looked up into the branches, letting the dark hold her, and said the things she would say 100 times in 100 different rooms for the rest of her life. Thank you for showing up, she told him. Always, he said, as if the word were a key he would never misplace. The world would continue to be the world. Deadlines and flights, headlines, and logistics. Days that refused to glow without coaxing. They did not imagine they had solved it. They had done something smaller and bigger at once. They had decided to be a bridge and a roof and, when necessary, a lantern. They had decided to be ordinary enough to last. Months from now, the fruit trees in June's garden would be heavy, and Bryn and Malik would stand at the end of a row with their sleeves rolled and their hands sticky with peaches. He would photograph her laughing from the middle of a sun flare because she would forget to be composed. She would preview the frames and say, that one is us. And he would nod because the light would have told the truth again. All of it, all the way back to a silver car and a stranger's warm voice and an offered arm, would make a shape that looked less like luck than like courage practiced once and then again. And if anyone asked later how a billionaire CEO ended up building a life that fit, Bryn would say, without dashes or footnotes, that she chose to be brave in a garden on a day when magnolias made the air sweet, and a man who understood timing chose to be brave too.